It's 9 o'clock on a bright Friday morning here in South Africa. Welcome to everybody who is watching the recording or live in the studio audience. We have some guests, so we'll be introducing them in a second. Welcome to our podcast. This morning is going to be a bumper session. I'm pretty sure we're not going to get everything in, but we're going to give it a shot. So without much further ado, welcome. We're going to be talking about AWPs for project success. So yeah, let's get going. Join the inner circle, like, subscribe, and hit the bell button to get notifications from our YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is going crazy. We've got a couple of thousand views on the videos over the past 2 weeks, and subscribers going crazy. So like, subscribe our channel, and we'll keep coming with the project management stuff. Rules of the podcast: there are no rules. Be part of the conversation, so please chat with us. We will make sure that we'll be responding to the YouTube channel comments. So yeah, check out our websites, check out the Instagram, and get with project management. Right, in the seat this morning, my name is Geoff Golding, CEO and founder of KEY360 and SSG, and we have Gerard Ulofse as a moderator on the session. And jumping to our studio audience, we're very excited to have Thomas Weedman join us this morning from GLPS. We'll give him a chance to introduce himself. And we've got Geoff Golding, who's one of our senior planners. So we've got all the planners in the house this morning. We're happy to have Thomas in the building again as a guest. We've worked with Thomas on many occasions in the past, both here in South Africa and in India and in various places. So Thomas, over to you if you'd like to introduce yourself and GLPS for a second.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to come and join you guys and give a bit of input onto AWPs. Small introduction on myself. Obviously, as Steve mentioned, my name is Thomas Weedman. I've got 12 years experience in the planning field in various industry sectors: mining, processing, oil and gas, construction. And I'm currently working with GLPS Project Services. GLPS is a professional project management and engineering firm with key focus on the design, improvement, and EPCM service for smelting industry, whether it be greenfield or brownfield. GLPS prides itself, I think, mostly in having built a highly experienced and knowledgeable project team that consists of hands-on project managers, on a professional project managers driven procurement and controlled management with contract management, as well as disciplined, diverse engineers, designers, cost controllers, and obviously we've also got a very robust drafting team. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome, Thomas. Thanks for joining us this morning. We love GLPS, so great to have you on the show. Bucket list, as always, this morning we will be talking about KEY360, and again we've had requests to keep the talking down to a minimum and get into the software. So if you want to miss the talking, just skip along to a couple of minutes later, and we'll get into the software. And we will be delivering a lot of short videos as well, specifically around KEY360 and around the functionality. So, right, advanced work packaging. Thomas, Geoff, what are we talking about this morning? Geoff, let's start with you.
Basically, advanced work packages works at the level below your standard project schedule. Some would take it as low as the plot haunt, as we call it in South Africa, the tracking sheet.
Right.
And then defining the scope, the work, the requirements, the materials, the access at a very, 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 very low level to expedite the project and manage better.
You know, in the old days, we used to call it work breakdown structure. These days, they call it AWP. And I think there's a correlation there in terms of the preparation up front and defining the elements that you're actually going to put through the methodology of the project. So Thomas, your understanding of advanced work packaging?
So I think from my understanding and from my experience, it's almost a project management tool to incorporate engineering, procurement, and construction, and create a combined working structure of all of these different disciplines that often are, let's say, driven alone, where engineers do the engineering and then they don't get involved in the procurement or into the constructability phases. So I think AWP, these work packages, basically it breaks down your work package. You break down your entire project into areas and sub areas, and then into a finite detail, incorporating the engineering side of it, the procurement side of it, the supply, the fabrication, and then obviously the construction, the constructability, involving access of other contractors, ensuring what needs to be done is done on time and is sequenced correctly. And it provides then information to the foreman on site, the guys with the boots on the ground, with an installation work package that gives them the drawings that they need from the engineering, the material they require from procurement, the 3D models that's obviously been developed by the engineering team, and a timeline of what the scope is, how long you have to do it, and then giving a full, robust package of materials, labor, resource requirements, so that the foreman doesn't have scenarios where there is standing time, where he's looking for tools, looking for material, looking in the laydown area. And I think AWP essentially is a function to increase efficiency and productivity and reduce time loss and essentially cost overruns. So
I mean, you've covered a lot in those statements, and the upfront setup. You've covered sequencing. You've covered obviously the benefits of work packaging, and then you've covered the phased view of how projects actually should work. So what do we understand? Let me get out the way here. So what do we understand under AWP? Process framework for industrial construction projects that facilitate engineering planning to be driven by construction sequencing, and I think that's a very important concept. Is that and I want to actually highlight this section here, and we take it a step further, and it actually comes directly from commissioning, right?
Correct.
So the packaging of AWPs actually starts at the back end and says, well, what do we want to commission? How do we structure that into construction? How do we structure that into fabrication work packages, delivery work packages? Then we go back, obviously, into the procurement cycle, and we define procurement work packages. And these are then defined backwards from construction, fabrication, and procurement back into engineering work packages. All right. So it's actually just a systemic methodology of applying good project management in a fashion that gives you the ability to control and sequence these packages effectively. Now, you mentioned tools, Thomas. Now, obviously, today we're talking about KEY360 because tools are the engine that makes this thing actually work on a mega project environment. Because whether you're working on a spreadsheet or on some sort of database or on advanced AWP systems like KEY360, that tool gives you the ability to structure and then put the engine together that we're looking at. So just for a bit of context, we've talked about the phase model. and we'd like to harbour on about that. So during the study phase of the project, during the feasibility, before we actually get into execution, we need to do a lot of work in terms of work packaging and structuring of the job so that we've got the estimate packaged correctly, we've got the procurement packages structured correctly, we've obviously got the vendors structured correctly so that we understand how we actually go into this execution phase. So today we're going to be talking about this setup phase that allows us to go into an effective AWP environment in running projects, right? So, and this is extremely important, and why projects don't do this is a factor of a lot of things, which we're not going to go into today because I think that's a whole podcast on its own in terms of saying, why are we not doing AWPs effectively? So let's jump into some proper theory, and we credit CII for this image, and it talks to a lot of the things that we've been talking about in the last couple of minutes. So advanced work packaging is around this process that we need to get in place during the upfront front-end planning and the detailed design so that we can have an effective construction phase, right? And often these things get clouded because we either don't have the time or we don't have the project definition upfront to actually do this effectively. And as an organization, we always sort of work on the premise, any definition is better than no definition, right? So whether the definition that you have when you go into a fast track project or a project where you've got a lot of time, you need to put that definition on the table, right? Whatever definition that is. Okay, so what we're talking about here is obviously construction work packages and engineering work packages, all right? And we'd like to advance this into procurement work packages that eventually give you fabrication work packages, and then we get to integrated work packages, which allow you to do that advanced planning so that, Thomas, as you mentioned, when you get onto a site, everybody knows what they're doing, and you have the ability to resequence, right? So sequencing is one thing, but when things go wrong on projects, which they very seldom do, okay, that was a joke, which they always do, life happens. And you need to be in a position to resequence that work to be able to get into the right position and work in the areas where work front is available. So work face planning, Thomas, you mentioned boots on the ground. Okay, and that's effectively where you lose money in construction, right?
Correct.
Because if you're doing the wrong thing, then that's where it makes a big difference. So why AWP? Now, a couple of outputs from KEY360, right? Now these may come from different tools, from different areas, but the ability to look at your phase model of commissioning, construction, fabrication, inside an integrated platform and based on the work packages that you've defined, right? So very important to be able to see where you should be and where you are in a real-time environment. Now this view, it looks like a Gantt, but it's actually a phase model, right? So the Gantt sits at a lower level of detail, and we're going to go into that when we go into KEY360. So the ability to produce these overall charts and say, right, these are the timelines that this project is going through, and how do we reflect that? The next output that we're going to look at when we go into KEY360 is what we call commodity curves. And again, I'm going to move out of the way a little bit here, because what we've got in front of us is a rate of progress, right? And when we're looking at commodities, when we're looking at work packages, this is an extremely important concept, the concept of operational throughput. So a lot of the project up to about 70, 80% progress, some say 60%, we're actually just chasing progress, right? And then we're going to shift the view over into a system or a commissioning or a finishing perspective. Okay, so rate achieved last 2 weeks and the rate required for the next 4 weeks is an important concept. And if you can measure commodities in terms of that picture, we can get to the point where we say, right, this is how we wanted to execute the job. The green ones are how we're actually producing. And then the orange ones are the upcoming schedule. Okay. Now, having this type of output in an integrated system based on the 3D model, based on the definition of the work packages is really where we want to be. And this leads us into normal S-curve tracking. So the S-curve also, and in KEY360, you can produce what we call the deviation matrix. The deviation matrix is a powerful tool to actually reflect the difference between plan and actual. And it has a massive influence on the project in terms of what's actually going on. So in this curve, we're predicting getting back on track, right? But what the deviation matrix is telling us is that that's not really happening. Okay? And this type of information that's coming out of our tools actually predicts the future for us and allows us to react early enough to actually make a difference. Okay, so what are we actually talking about? We're talking about building a facility inside with a capital project, right? And it comes from design and all the other elements of the project controls and data, and eventually converts into a physical asset. Okay, and this is a project on KEY360 itself, and all the elements that relate to that. So just a question to the audience again. You know, we talk about work packaging, but what other systems do we actually need to make this a reality for us if we're talking about tools and systems? Thomas.
So I think in terms of the tools, obviously, AWPs are built up of three major parts, which you discussed earlier, of cost, procurement, and then the engineering side. Using all of these, obviously, there's a lot of document control and document management, and having information readily available for the team so that they can build and develop robust packages and break down into further detail until we get to the point where the foreman can get that final installation work package and use the information he's got, and that information is up to date and relevant and detailed enough that he can move on with his job without having any standing time or downtime.
So I mean, even in construction, documents are the underbuild of this whole process, right? So we need to be able to define scope, define the timelines. You talked about the cost elements, which are obviously all integrated in there, but we need the underbuild of construction of document management, which points to every single phase and then points to the support functions inside the platform. So this is an important concept. Is when we're looking at the tools that we need to actually do AWP, you need to look at an integrated situation. So Geoff, you guys were watching a video on AWP during the week, and one interesting comment that you made was that this group related to CII was actually talking about a multitude of different systems that put together to get to the point where we've got some sort of formulation of AWP. Now, what are your comments on that in terms of what you know about what we do in KEY360, and how do we actually facilitate this process inside?
Yeah, the video was very insightful in that one of their major issues was how to get data to talk to each other from multiple systems.
Right.
And it was actually entertaining because I think they spent a huge amount of effort and time on trying to get these multiple systems to talk to each other so that the data could be collated into a single data set that could then be assessed and cleaned and tidied and verified. Right. The problem on most projects, number one, is the sheer volume of data that you have to manage. But almost more importantly is how do we get the data from multiple sources, clients, EPCMs, contractors,
right,
fabricators, how do we get all their data to actually be speaking the same language?
So that's an important concept. Is we're sitting with a business to business requirement as well. So it's not just internal. There's a massive business to business communication requirement if we want to get this data actually talking to each other and run an AWP program which is seamless, effective, and doesn't need 1 million controllers on board to actually run it.
Okay, Steve, maybe if I can jump in there. So I think one of the phases of AWPs and developing AWPs is to determine and identify your path of construction. And that gives your main function basically from your scope, from your designers, the engineers and procurement teams. Then it goes into the time from the planners, procurement as well, with supply and fabrication timelines to incorporate that, to see what works can be done early. Obviously, early works is always a benefit. And then combining cost with the WBS. And once you incorporate all of these systems, you are then able to generate AWPs. But obviously, there is a lot of information management. And that's basically one of the functions of AWP is you can do a lot of this work before execution can start, which means that when execution starts, you're not running around in that first month of construction trying to find your feet. You are able to hit the ground running and
very important,
have good productivity in that first weeks.
No, I love that comment because it's about advanced, right? So advanced is not it's actually doing things well in setup. That's what advanced means. It's that, and that's what it's about. We've got this model that I'm not going to spend too much time on because it's a bit self-explanatory, but it's very important in terms of defining exactly what those packages look like. So I'm going to go through this very quickly in terms of this schedule, but understanding that this is how a construction project works. So over here we've got the overall contract structure of the program management and down to the EPCs or the EPCMs. But then when we get into a design, procure, fabricate, construct, and commission facility, then we need to understand for each discipline, all right, what the objects are that specify into those specific areas, because that's what we're talking about, right? So EWPs sit here, and we've got the procurement work packages that sit here. We've got major equipment groups. We define them as major equipment groups during the fabrication phase, because what that does is it allows you to construct in a certain sequence, right? And in this white section here, we define those advanced work packages for each different type, and they shift in phase from each of those as we go through the process. So in engineering, the groups, the EWPs, look different, obviously, to the procurement packages. Then obviously we break those down into what we call major equipment groups, which are the fabrication delivery packages. So depending on the delivery sequence required by construction, which is then obviously our construction work packages, and then we deliver into a system breakdown structure, which allows us to commission. So building a model like this, and Thomas, as you've indicated, to do this up front and do it as part of a methodology, right? So it's part of the execution of the project. It doesn't happen when we get into construction, when we try and find our feet and try and produce our commodity curves and try and get into this. So it is really an upfront function, and then understanding how each of these are actually controlled, not at a Gantt level, but at a tracking level. Okay.
Yes.
Now, Geoff, you mentioned this a couple of times, is that this actually references how we track projects and how we run through that. So I love the way where this is going, and I just missed a slide, I think. Right, in terms of the context of the advantages of AWP. Now, this was produced by CII, the Construction Institute, and they've quoted a couple of numbers here. 25% more time on tools, improved safety. This list is obviously extensive, right? So this is a very brief view, but if we look at the numbers in dollars, if these numbers are even close to correct, there are billions of dollars that are either being wasted by not applying AWPs, or there is a massive saving to be achieved when we go the AWP route. Okay, so the advantages of doing this correctly and spending the man hours up front, Thomas, you mentioned it's an upfront function. The man hours up front to set this up in as much detail as possible, so that when you hit the floor, you're actually saving this 25% more time on tools, which is effectively lost, right? And it's not even a saving, because it's one of our colleagues many years ago said something which was pretty profound. Gianpaolo Redivo, one of our engineers, and he said, you know, doing project controls correctly, and I'm talking about AWPs as well, is not about saving money. It's about not losing money that you have spent, right? So it's about loss control as much as it is about saving on your budget, and that's generally how construction projects sort of run out. So these numbers translate into billions of dollars annually. So that's important.
So maybe if I can add on to that, Steve, exactly what you're talking about, that AWPs give us a greater ability to track earned value management, because you are able to break out each activity into a cost code, a WBS level, and get full earned value management at the type of level that benefits the contractor and the client at the end of the day. I think too often earned value management is done on a very high level, and costs are slipped and missed, and loss of time and overrun on cost is then the result. So I think using these advanced work packages gives you that full usability of earned value management and proper control, and you are then able to identify where the gaps are and fix them proactively as opposed to reactively.
Right. So Thomas, are you I mean, do you know earned value? Are we going to invite you back for that podcast?
Maybe, we'll see.
All right, good.
I'm always available, Steve.
Yeah, so I think earned value is an important concept, because we can't afford to overpay, right? So earned value is about making sure that the money that we pay is keeping track or lagging behind our progress. We always want the progress to run ahead of our costs, of our payments, right? So but you're right. I mean, earned value, to be able to do earned value effectively, if you've done AWPs, is actually pretty easy, right? If the AWPs that you've defined across all those areas actually relate into the costs and the estimate, that's a whole different discussion and a whole different ballgame. But what I think, I mean, these numbers that we were talking about here, from a KEY360 perspective, we're claiming a lot more than that in terms of savings, in terms of efficiency, and in terms of capability. So I think that's very important in terms of doing that. Again, a slide from the CII, which takes us into the next level, right? So how do we actually get this done, and what are we doing about this in terms of actual operation? So looking around at the AWP environment, everybody is looking for tools. Everybody is looking for the ability to do all this stuff inside an integrated environment, because that allows you to achieve a lot of outputs. You can dashboard better, you can structure better, you can communicate business to business more efficiently, and you can connect all this to documentation, which allows you to hand over to the asset owner very easily afterwards. And the quality of the construction is determined by what you can hand over and how that is handed over to the owner. So from a KEY360 perspective, again, this is all taken care of, right? This is where we started with KEY360 in terms of building a platform which covers all of this, allows you to run the project. And I think the trick with AWPs is also not to overcomplicate. It's a very simple process of structuring and then running that in a sequencing capability through Gantt and through tracking management. Right. So let's jump into this a little bit. We've got a stage 1 definition here around preliminary planning and design. Obviously, during this phase, we need to define CWPs and EWPs. Okay. Then we get into a detailed engineering phase where we're actually using this information to control the output of the work in the sequence that's required for the construction phase and the commissioning. Okay, and this is the heart of IWPs when we get into execution, is how they are being fed by the previous phases. And if this is done efficiently and correctly, this Meccano set actually just formulates itself. These dominoes fall in the right sequence, and it actually runs extremely well. Now, if any of these are out of sync, that's when the chaos starts, because the impact of interdisciplinary interfaces and all of that is now causing us cost and delaying the schedule on various fronts. Okay, so I think that's an important aspect. So running through these different phases through platform technology is extremely important. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a minute to jump into KEY360 and take us on a little bit of a journey in terms of how KEY360 achieves the AWPs that we've looked at. Now, Thomas, Geoff, feel free to jump in at any time you have a comment or anything to add. I want to go through a couple of the steps that we do. I think just understanding KEY360, for those of the audience who've never seen KEY360, one of the elements is obviously our ability to produce landing pages, which are branded and white labeled according to your specific organization. So GLPS is in the making, Thomas, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So having an interface which reflects the AWP capabilities, the AWP methodology, drives the whole organization into that type of thinking. All right. And where are we going with this? So the bottom line is we need to be able to take the elements of either a 3D model or a design, a block plan, etc., and be able to drill into these elements so that we can actually design the plant effectively. And that really takes us into these different elements of data inside the platform, which need to be defined according to those structures. So how do we actually do that in KEY360? We start with the definition of those EWPs, procurement packages, and CWPs. And it's very easily done, all right, by defining that in terms of the work breakdown structure of the job. Now, these breakdown structures are 100% configurable. There is no limit on the structure of those. So when we define these in KEY360, there are no limitations in terms of coding, in terms of the design of the EWPs. And we have the ability to create those multiple layers so that you can manage at exactly the right level of detail and then use the structure to actually make sure that we're connected into the other areas. So EWPs should be able to reference into CWPs and procurement packages, fabrication deliveries, etc. So that's defined in terms of the structure of KEY360, and that's the starting point. Then, and that's not the purpose of this session, but then we dive into estimating. So I just want to jump into an estimate very quickly because, Thomas, you mentioned costs earlier. I think it's extremely important to understand that these elements of the AWPs must reflect through every single one of our systems, right? So in KEY360, we've got over 140 systems ranging from human resources, which facilitates our man loading, planning, and job descriptions, the physical task descriptions, all the way through to communication, which facilitates document control and action management, then running through scope management, so the physical definition of scope, and as I've said here, estimating, and then the other elements of time, cost, quality, risk. Every single one of these elements you'll see is directly connected into the same EWP and AWP structure. So what that does is it gives you this golden thread that runs through the entire duration of the project, through every single one of these phases, and all the way into the different elements. So even quality management and risk management and health and safety have the same underbuild of AWPs. Okay, so that's a critical element of what we do in KEY360, is this integrative connection of all of these different systems. And then obviously, as you've mentioned, all of these are connected also into document management, right? So KEY360 document management is extremely advanced and mature in terms of defining the EWPs, defining the documents that we need to deliver into the project, and then running those through planning as well as acceptance inside the project, right? So let's take it a little bit of a step further. We looked at the ability to control from the 3D model and then inwards into the system. Just a note, we're looking at full integration of 3D models into KEY360 during 2024, right? Which means even the materials breakdown structure, which contains all the elements of AWP as well inside the 3D model, we're already importing those into KEY360 and testing IFC4 models, etc. So that's just a side note. But then having the ability to manage every single one of these elements inside the platform. All right, now let's start the process of defining EWPs, right? Because we've defined the drawings that we need and the engineering deliverables, but how do we actually package those into a sequence structure? Now in KEY360, we've got a tool which we call a tracking grid. Now it's a simple linear tracker, right? With a huge amount of bells and whistles on the back end. Now I know you guys use this tool extensively in India, building smelters for Jindal. So this was the engine that drove that construction project. And effectively and very simply, it's built on a couple of elements. The one element is the definition of steps that this should go through, right? It's a linear process, right? Obviously, in the Gantt, it takes on a different form, because if we look at the Gantt register, we have an integrative process which allows us to schedule between activities. But when we look at an EWP tracker runs on linear processes, and we actually define the schedule ID inside here, which creates the relationship between the Gantt and our EWP elements. So you'll see here on the left-hand side are the EWP elements per discipline, and the aggregated percentage as well as the earned commodity. So in KEY360, you can define a commodity against the tracking grid and have those earned commodities automatically create according to the rules of credit that are in these linear steps, right? So you can define exactly how much progress is claimed for each of these steps. And this progress is either updated through our mobile app interface or directly from document control. So even documents can advise the progress that is coming through to our AWP trackers, right? And these AWP trackers, I'll show you another example here of a fabrication tracker. Same thing, you'll see the same AWP's elements mentioned here, the modules of the plant, the specific delivery items in terms of fabrication, the planned dates of how these connect directly into the construction sequence, and again, the automatically calculated earned value and progress metrics, which is physical progress, according to the specific steps of the process. All right. Now, this takes some setup, right? So, question to the audience: AWP doesn't come for free in terms of the time you need to set this up. So, it really is a case of taking the time in the beginning to set this up effectively, and then running with it in terms of all the metrics. So, any comments on setup time?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the cons. If we look at the pros and cons of AWPs, one of the cons is that initial investment of outlaying personnel, information capturing, document control, engineering captains and procurement captains and construction guys that are all going to integrate. And there's a lot of hours burnt in the initial setup phase, which can be a daunting investment to make, to outlay that cost, especially if the company or organization doesn't have a robust software. And obviously, I think KEY360 looks like the answer. But if they don't have that software to build and develop a way of tracking and managing all of that information and collaboration of all the different disciplines, I think is a major concern for a lot of people, which is why AWPs are often disregarded and a simple schedule is used.
But on every single job, we burn those hours into construction anyway.
No, absolutely, but we don't often see it. And I think
exactly.
I think that's the key point of what you're saying is we don't see it being burnt. So although it looks intimidating to invest in the beginning of this project and outlay a big chunk of change, people are nervous, but you lose that money throughout the project phase if it's not managed correctly, with low productivity rates, inefficient work, standing time, and you will then have loss of time and cost overruns.
The funny thing, Thomas, is we've been in project controls for many years, as you have, and the funny thing is, if you do it correctly, you don't actually get to see what you've saved.
Correct. Yeah.
You don't get to see how well you've done, because the job runs well, and everybody's like, okay, well that's just the way it should be. So that's a very interesting comment. So you need to spend that upfront time to settle this up and make sure that this is running extremely well, so that you can actually dive into these specific elements and manage the job throughout into the commissioning and the eventual sign off of this plant into a completed product. So what I'm looking at here is another element of KEY360. It's construction inspections. We do have an extremely advanced construction inspection capability, where every single AWP and eventually IWP is mapped into the system, and you can then manage that setup directly in KEY360 and make sure that your status management of those inspected items, as well as the commissioning phase, and then the specific AWPs are managed throughout. And every single item is logged, categorized in KEY360, and as part of the handover pack that goes into the quality control plans and the data books and the final documentation that's handed over to the client. So it really is a golden thread. You'll see the same colors even of these items coming through all the way from the estimate through the EWPs, through the procurement packages, into fabrication, into construction, and then out the other side. And eventually what we then end up with is the ability to produce dashboarding and control. So control in KEY360 is everything, and the ability to be able to dashboard so easily, because we have integrated data sets and then eventually leading into what we call IOCs. So
sorry, Steve,
always,
I don't want to interrupt you, but I think
no,
I'm just impressed with the way KEY360 can be easily configured to a different setup of a project. So, I mean, all projects are different. Whether you build conveyors, there's always different incline sections, different overland sections, different loading bins, and the way a company that builds on this project will develop an AWP structure to develop their AWPs and their work packages. On the next project, it doesn't work. But I think, I'm just impressed with the configuration that you can change on KEY360 to adapt to the new projects. So I think that's something that's, in my experience, often lost. And then on the next project, we don't use AWPs because now we have to rewrite the book, where it seems like KEY360 can assist to develop with the project.
It seems, I mean, when you watch videos and commentary on AWPs in the general industry, whether you're looking at Africa or the US or Europe or Australia, the Middle East, everybody's sort of struggling with the same things, and it seems like there's not enough momentum being built in terms of fixed methodology, in terms of this is how we run it, this is how it's actually operating. So there are a couple of operators, EPCs on a global scale that actually operates this way, but many of them are actually just reacting to whoever's on the job, be it the all the way from VP controls all the way down to the construction and the controllers on site. So I think,
sorry, Steve, on some of the projects that we've worked on, the experience we felt is often you don't know what you don't know. And when you're building a framework to develop AWPs, you feel like it's a amazing system, but if you're missing a key element and you don't know it, it is going to impact you down the line and you're going to lose money. Where if you can build a framework on KEY360, are you then able to identify your missing gaps in the future?
Well, it's about learning, right? So I mean, it's a simple thing, but if we look at the closeout and handover module, there are specific modules around learning lessons. Well, we call them lessons listed because you only learn when you've actually adapted them into your methodology and your ongoing processes. So it's not about just doing it once. It's about project management and the methodology of AWPs becoming part of your normal process. So that's really difficult to do because in a changing environment, you've got different people. And I think the trick is to have a system like KEY360, which then becomes the normal standard. So as you go into the different phases of the project, this is where you define EWPs, and that's part of the setup. It's actually part of the proposal portion of the job in terms of getting it in the first place. So that's how embedded KEY360 allows the AWP process to be inside your organization. That's just the way it happens. And whether you've got new staff coming in, the dashboards and everything is configured according to that specific requirement.
So essentially, your main framework is already developed.
Exactly. And duplicated from an existing project. So once you've done one or two or three AWP-driven projects, and I think we then need to start talking about critical chain, right? And how critical chain and theory of constraints and AWP work together, because that is when the real magic happens. But that's a subject for a different day. We will be talking about AWPs connecting with critical chain, because that's really where we need to go. But again, that takes a methodology. Critical chain is a method of communication with the client. It's a method of extracting float out of the schedule.
Steve, I think it's also important to note that once your base data set is predetermined, which means we understand how schedules are going to be built, we understand what the WBS is, we understand what software is going to be used to collate all the data. Right. You can now start looking at the very important things like governance.
Correct.
auditability,
Right.
reporting, dashboarding. Once
Which
you
also
get
all
good at
cost
those,
money.
you realize that the entire foundation is stable.
Yeah, I mean, and not even talking about claims and forensics, right?
No.
Because claims and forensics are easily managed when we have a well-structured AWP.
And they very
Because the
seldom
story,
happen.
yeah,
Correct. Yeah.
the storyline and the chronology is 100% defined. So it's really not difficult. I want to go into two areas quickly before we jump out of here. We're running out of time. Obviously, daily diaries are critical in terms of what we do inside KEY360. So just a comment, AWPs are also built into daily diaries. So all of the elements of a good daily diary, talking about weather, talking about staff and attendance, talking about plant and equipment, talking about site delays, site access registers, all of these elements, the connection into things like field engineering queries or technical queries, depending on your definition, contractual early warnings, so notifications, corrective actions, all of these elements inside the platform, the health and safety elements, all connected together inside a cohesive environment, and then obviously the linked activities. So producing effective daily diaries inside the platform, which goes along with our health and safety capability.
I think this is quite nice, Steve. Often on projects, project managers, planners, like Geoff and myself, we always try and track progress, but we don't often look at performance. And we might be getting good progress, but we might have leading and lagging indicators of performance that are often missed. And I think this definitely gives you a good hold and handle of where you're missing in terms of your labor losses and your safety issues. So I think, yeah, that's quite impressive.
I like the early warning functionality. I need to know something is going to go wrong so I can react not after it's gone wrong.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's only possible when you've actually got a view, an advanced view of what's coming. So one of the elements of KEY360 is actually tracking not what we on at the moment, looking forward. And I know we do a 2-week look ahead on most projects, and everybody does that. And we do some pull planning, etc., in terms of running it. But actually having the capability from a systemic perspective to say what's on the horizon, coming in 5 days, coming in 4 days, coming in 3 days, coming in 2 days. And I stated that way because having a dashboard which does that allows you to actually foresee things before they're actually due, which means you're actually working in an advanced state of progress and not waiting for the moment of delivery to say something has gone wrong, because the domino impact of that down the line is always catastrophic and has cost impact, and then uses up resources which should actually be working on the advanced planning, not the historic planning and the reactive planning.
I mean, obviously the topic is advanced work packages, and one of the steps is to understand your path of construction. And I think that then ties into that to give you that idea of what's happening in 5 days, 3 days, 2 days, or in 90 days. And I think
I love that word that you've used, the path of construction, because I think that's those threads, those constructability threads, is what actually drives the perspective.
Correct. And it's very different to a schedule. A schedule gives you your list of your tasks. Exactly. This is how much your duration is, but your path of construction gives you a further level of detail to understand resource constraints, access constraints, and various other dynamics that often cause delays in construction projects.
Well, it brings to mind, Thomas, an exercise that we did in KEY360 from a forward planning perspective for a pharmaceutical plant in North Carolina. They had different facilities and different scenarios that they wanted to look at in terms of the delivery of those facilities. They had limited resource availability. So stacking those commodities on top of each other inside KEY360 and running the different scenarios to see where we were peaking and how that advanced planning was actually panning out allowed the executive to look at these different scenarios and then decide, okay, this was the best method of progress. So once you got control over that data, the control over the commodities, the metrics, and then obviously the AWPs, suddenly that all becomes very easy to produce. Right, I'm going to jump into the final steps of the presentation. Again, I want to come to the outputs. So the outputs from an integrated system allow you to pull S-curves and deviation matrices across the job. So with any permutation of AWPs, you can produce this information. And as you've mentioned, Geoff, I think you said the ability to connect the engineering team with contractors, with fabricators, and everybody into a community or a network of common data is pretty much unheard of outside of KEY360. And I'm saying this with a lot of respect to then commodity management. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning, producing this type of data and actually influencing this. We can see here we've got production lines here where we need to actually remain into. So we need to get these actuals coming into this area. Now, if you put this on mobile devices, in terms of site containers, in terms of mobile devices on a construction site, the human behavior reaction to this is significant. So managing AWPs is one thing, but actually bringing this information down to, Thomas, again, you said boots on the ground, bringing that information into the site container and onto a mobile device and onto a site television screen is actually the end game, because the teams can react to this in real time and the level of information that can be produced is significant.
Oh, for
Now,
sure.
Thomas, you talked about the path of construction. Love that reference, because these types of views allow you to actually demonstrate that and visualize that, so that, again, on the ground, we can actually see, and I'm saying on the ground in the containers on site, we can actually see what the path of construction should have been. And very soon, we'll be able to demonstrate this path of construction in terms of the 3D model inside KEY360. So we're very excited about that eventuality. And then the ability to take that information back into the design office, back into the boardroom, and more importantly, back into what we call an IOC. So KEY360 gives you the ability to produce a full integrated operations center. Now, interestingly, we run facilities with a control room. So we run technical plants and facilities with a control room, and we have controllers watching so that things don't go wrong. But we don't do that for project management, and we don't do that for normal operations inside a plant environment. And in our opinion, the main reason for that was the technology doesn't exist to make that integration. So as Geoff mentioned, the videos that they were watching about AWP earlier this week were actually about integration of data, not about actually AWP. It was, we need to connect this to this, and we need this system to do this, and then we connect it in here, and we need a common data set here to be able to pull a graphics element out of that. All of this can be done on one platform, and that gives you the ability to produce the IOC of the future, which runs both plants as well as projects. So KEY360 is moving aggressively into plant maintenance and control, and that's what we're into. So dashboarding. Yeah,
it's definitely exciting what you're talking about, Steve. So, I mean, I spoke about it earlier, is that initial investment to train everyone. But if KEY360 already offers you that initial framework, it broadens your horizon to be able to develop AWPs. And I know many guys are nervous to have that massive outlay of cost. But I mean, there's that old joke of if we pay for training for our employees and they leave, well, what if you don't train them and they stay? So I think KEY360 is definitely a great framework to start with and build on.
Well, the interesting thing is that initial outlay, if it's done in a different platform, I mean, you build those estimates, you build those structures, you build those costs. It's just done in isolation. Whereas if it's done on a common AWP platform, suddenly all those problems just disappear, and you actually get away with a lot less setup time and a lot less structure. All right, so we've gone through KEY360. We've hit our 60-minute limit. Any questions from the audience or from our international audience online? We've got people watching the online audience. Any questions? All right. Doesn't seem to be coming offline. Please connect to our channel on YouTube, ring the bell, all of that beautiful stuff so that we can get hold of you. Talk to us about KEY360. We'd love to be in touch, and we'll help you set up your AWPs and run projects like you've never seen before and dashboard like you've never seen before. All right. Thank you all for attending. Thomas, thank you, and GLPS for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again, and we'll have you around for earned value if you're in the area. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and have a great week. Cheers.
Thank you.